chilling, yo.
And you should run your show a little better.
You're not good.
I'm Jimmy Mathis, and I approve this message.
Good for you, Jimmy. Now go tell someone who cares.
And they're off.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Jimmy Mathis Show with you till 10 o'clock on this cold Saturday morning. Taking your phone calls, 410-467-WBAL. Toll-free long distance, 1-800-767-WBAL. Verizon is *sign WBAL. AT&T, # WBAL. At 8:45, Delegate Ron George will be joining us talking about the gas tax increase getting out of the House. It now goes to the Senate, which almost absolutely it will pass the Senate, then goes to Martin O'Malley's pen. We keep hammering this home every week because it's important that people understand this cannot go to referendum. Appropriations, money, pieces of legislation cannot go to referendum. So if this gets signed by the governor, it is here to stay. The advocates of this tax increase are saying that it hasn't been increased since 1992, 20 years. That means that it hasn't been palatable to Marylanders for 20 years. It will no longer, if this gets signed by the governor, this will no longer go through the legislative process. So we're going to spend a lot of time today. Brian Sears from Patch.com in studio with me until 9 o'clock when Senator Jim Brochin joins me. And Steve Stoughton also in studio right now for a little segment we like to call Round and Round.
I took away from that meeting the belief that we would have a vote on the full bill and a vote on ammunition feeding devices of more than 10 bullets. This is very important to me, and I'm not going to lay down and play dead. I think the American people have said in every single public poll that they support this kind of legislation. It's aimed to protect children, to protect schools and malls. It's aimed to dry up the supply of these over time. It came out on a 10-8 vote of the Judiciary Committee. Not to give me a vote on this would be a major betrayal of trust.
Dianne Feinstein talking about the future of gun legislation at the federal level. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid Thursday said that any bill that passes the Senate on gun control would include broader background checks, drawing a tougher line on the issue ahead of a contentious floor debate that'll take place next month. Brian and Steve, the big part of this news is Reid said that there would still be debate when it comes to the capacity of magazine clips. The assault rifle ban looks like it's now off the table. My take on this is the Democrats are trying to save some sort of face on getting some sort of gun control through. The two big parts of this were the magazine restrictions, taking it down to 10, which is now off the table, and also banning quote-unquote scary-looking guns.
Yeah, and they're only going to get the background check. I think they shot for the moon so they could look like they were doing something when they knew if they got background checks, they'd be lucky with it.
Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think the background checks were the component that everybody thought they would absolutely get. The assault rifles or the assault style rifles, because a lot of these are things that look, as you said, look scary, but aren't necessarily as scary as they look. I think everybody sort of figured that was going to be a tougher sell. And look, we're seeing that in Maryland. We're seeing that in Maryland. I mean, they're talking about amending the gun bill that's working its way through the legislature to start removing some of the component pieces, telescoping stocks and things like that that make weapons look scarier, but don't necessarily mean anything when it comes to the actual weapon.
Well, here's the thing, and Steve, to your point, I think that this goes beyond just a negotiating tool. Coming out of the horrible situation that happened in Newtown, I think that Obama and Biden both thought that they actually could get this through. I mean, we already have background checks. I understand this takes it to the next level, but I do believe that there was a sentiment in Washington that they could, at the very least, maybe not get the assault rifles ban reinstated, but that they could get some limitation on magazine clips. And now we recently passed the 3-month anniversary of Newtown, and I'm just wondering if legislators, which is what we're seeing here in Maryland, to what you were saying, Brian, they're just seeing that this isn't palatable anymore.
No, it's their. See, I think I kind of disagree with that. I don't think they ever thought they were maybe hoping the mood to change and they could get tougher restrictions in. I think it was kind of typical government as usual. We have to be seen to be doing something, so we'll do something.
But if that were the case, guys, later in the week, last week, you had Michael Bloomberg and Vice President Joe Biden standing in front of families of victims from Sandy Hook. They're still trying to push this forward. And I believe that goes beyond the political posturing of this. I think they still believe there may, even though Reed's not going to bring the full bill to the floor for debate, they still believe there may be a chance to save this. And having Senator Feinstein, who I disagree with politically on most of what she believes in, but I do believe that she's very sincere in her gun control beliefs. I mean, that's how she became mayor of San Francisco.
I believe she is. I just maybe I'm being overly pessimistic this morning, but I think they shot for the moon and they'll be happy to get this. And even if they pass the full thing through the Senate, it's never getting through the House.
Well, and Brian, speaking of bringing this back to the local level, right, as far as setting the tone for gun control, what does this do? And I understand that at the state level they're beginning to scale it back a little bit, but what, just from a posturing standpoint, federally, how does this tie into the local legislation that O'Malley's trying to get through?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that some of that remains to be seen. I'm going to be cynical reporter here for a minute and just tell you I don't know what Biden and the folks at the national level think they can still get. I just don't think that there's any political downside to not asking for everything that you want, even if you don't get it, because you can still come out on the other side and say, "Hey, look, I wanted more," and I don't think that there's a political downside to that, even if you don't get everything you asked for.
Well, with that being said, then why wouldn't Harry Reid bring it to the floor?
That's a good question. I don't know.
And what I find interesting about this, guys, all this is still on the backs of Newtown, correct? I mean, that's still the
motivating force. Yeah.
3 months ago, since then, over 3,000 people have lost their lives to gun violence. Does it make sense to change the narrative away from one horrific situation and climb up to 30,000 feet and start to paint the picture of the overall problem when it comes to gun violence, and not using Newtown, as horrific as it was? It's getting dated. It's drifting out of people's mind. Does it make sense to bring this full circle and go, look, since this horrific situation that got the nation's attention, we've lost 3,000 Americans because of gun violence, and make that the story?
Well, like you said, 3,000 separate Americans in 300 different cities doesn't get the same attention as 27 5-year-olds.
Children, right.
Children, yeah. Steve Stoden and Brian Sears in studio for Round and Round, taking your phone calls also, 410-467 WBAL. But right now it is 7:30, time for the news with Robert Lang. Good morning, Robert.
Morning, Jimmy. That bright light in the sky that you saw last night was a meteor. NASA officials say a single meteor streaked through the East Coast sky. No word if any part of it crashed to Earth. You can see video of the meteor at WBAL.com. Senate Democrats have put their mark on the budget battle, with House Republicans narrowly approving a $3.7 trillion blueprint for next year. It contains nearly $1 trillion in tax increases over 10 years, but shelters domestic programs. Cuts in those programs are part of a House blueprint that contains no taxes. Lawmakers in Washington now on their Easter Passover break. The Maryland House of Delegates has approved raising taxes on gasoline in the state for the first time in more than 2 decades. The measure would apply a 1% sales tax in July, in addition to the state's 23.5 cent per gallon excise tax, now being tied to inflation. The bill now moves to the Senate. The Ravens will open their season on the road September 5th. The Orioles and Major League Baseball refused to move the Orioles' home game set for that night to allow the Ravens to open at home, something the NFL traditionally lets the Super Bowl champion do. The Orioles will take on the Phillies today in Grapefruit League action. Coverage on WBAL starts at 1 o'clock. The WBAL Insta Weather Plus forecast: sunny, not as breezy today. Highs in the upper 40s to low 50s. Tonight, clear, lows in the lower 30s. Tomorrow, increasing clouds, highs in the mid-40s. Overnight Sunday into Monday, a wintry mix possible. Heaviest accumulations west of the Bay. Highs on Monday in the 30s. Right now we have sunny skies, 28 degrees. I'm Robert Lang on WBAL and WBAL.com.
Get our biggest savings ever during the Big Screen Store's model year-end clearance, with up to $1,500 off big screen HD TVs, including Samsung and Sharp, plus up to 70% off home theater furniture, all consoles and wall systems, leather and upholstered movie seating sectionals, and more.
The Big Screen Store showed us how to stream movies with a smart TV.
And save big money off our cable bill without computer hookups.
The Big Screen Store is your ultimate home theater experience in one store with real expert advice and professional people to set up and install. With more big screen choices at bigger savings. And during our model year-end clearance, get up to $1,500 off big screen HD TVs and save up to 70% off all consoles, wall systems, movie seating, sectionals, and more while they last. Better selection, better prices, better service.
The Big Screen Store.
The Big Screen Store.
The Big Screen Store.
The Big Screen Store, where smart advice and great service deliver a bottom line that beats online in Towson, Annapolis, Ellicott City, Westminster, and Frederick. Just go to thebigscreenstore.com for the location near you.
Welcome back to Round and Round, 410-467 WBAL. Steve Stoden, Brian Sears, helping me out with Round and Round this morning. Let's get a quick phone call in here. And Glenn in Easton, where there is not an air traffic control tower at Easton Airport. We'll be talking about that later. Glenn, good morning. How you doing?
I'm good. We have an air traffic controller. There's just nobody in it.
There's nobody in it. How many commercial flights are coming in and out of Easton today?
I read an article in our local paper the other day. There's a lot of private jet service that goes in and out of there. There's a lot of military traffic that goes through. And from what I read in the article, it says that this is a forced-down airport when they have controlled airspace over in D.C. So, it's important. I know that when Cheney was in office, that he was in and out all the time to go down to St. Michael's. So.
Mm-hmm. All things we'll be talking about in the 8 o'clock hour. Anyway, didn't mean to sidetrack you there, Glenn.
That's all right. My point is this whole gun control debate is focused on the wrong problem. It should be focused on the criminals who are committing gun violence, not the law-abiding citizens. If you look at what this at least the Maryland law, it's completely trying to take guns out of people's hands in Maryland that are law-abiding citizens. If we have to re-register assault weapons and pistols that we've already jumped through hoops to get in Maryland anyway, it's ridiculous. And federally, I think you're going to see maybe the background check thing goes through, but the assault weapons ban is dead. There's no way that vulnerable Democrats in conservative districts are going to vote for this. There's no way.
Well, and that's the point we've been making. Thank you very much, Glenn. Have a great weekend. Appreciate it. This is not just a party line vote. You do have moderate Democrats in flyover country that this is not going to land with their constituents. And I come back to, and I catch a lot of grief every time I say this, and I've been in the media for 17 years, and from the bottom of my heart, I don't think any individual story personally touched me as much as the massacre in Newtown. Being a father of two and one of my girls being of that age really, really affected me. But with that being said, this doesn't mean it's not a horrific, isolated, tragic situation. This is not a problem, a crisis in America that's going on a daily basis where you have gunmen running into school, blowing children away. But that's what's being used to sell this to the American people. When the gun violence issue, what we were talking about before we went to the news, is a much larger problem and one that can't be solved legislatively.
Right. I mean, one of the things you and I were talking about during the break was I had a conversation with Delegate Kurt Anderson, who was talking to me about some of the things that they were looking at in the gun bill, but he also said it doesn't, he was pretty clear with me that he didn't think that it went far enough to address the issue in Baltimore City, which ends up being a lot of drug violence, with handguns. And that's a much more difficult conversation to have. It's an easier thing to visualize if you're the American public, the idea of children, being killed in their school. I mean, there are a lot, I'm a parent too. And I mean, you look at that and, that hits home, that hits you where you live. It's a much more difficult thing to try and get the American public to grasp onto the narrative of, drug trade violence that happens in neighborhoods that they don't live in. And if you're not going into those neighborhoods and buying drugs, a lot of that just doesn't hit home for you. And then you have, things like, as I was saying, the Baltimore County Police Department, when they talk about murder totals for the year, one of the things that they point out is, very high percentages of their murders every year are people who knew the people that they were killing. And so again, that it instills this sense that there's not this random gun violence on the street. I'm safe walking my dog in Loch Raven Village. I can go to the mall and go to the grocery store because I'm not worried about somebody jacking me with a gun. Because again, it's people who know each other, and if we talk about it, it's drug related gun violence.
Steve, I want to get you in on this because we talk about the social aspect to this quite often on Round and Round. First of all, just because you don't die doesn't mean you haven't been shot or stabbed or assaulted.
And those statistics are never talked about.
They're never talked about, and when they are, they're greatly manipulated. As far as the difficult conversation, to your point, Brian, on the black-on-black crime aspect of this, I can get it started right now. First of all, we need, instead of talking about restricted magazine types or magazine sizes and scary weapon restrictions, and even the mental health aspect of this, which I believe is important, but that's a slippery slope because it's so subjective. What the governor needs to do, and I believe that this would have bipartisan support, is to go out and round up criminals that have violent criminals that have bench warrants out for their arrest, number one. Number two, the police commissioner, who I believe is doing a solid job so far, get police officers out of the car, back to beating the street, building a relationship with the law-abiding citizens that live in these bad areas. Third of all, start having a real conversation about the social aspect of this problem, which is fatherless homes, unmarried teenage pregnancy. That is all part of this. There's a huge social aspect which black leaders, churches need to get involved and start this dialogue. And it can't be solved with the swipe of the legislative pen. And those are three key points. Steve?
Well, and you're right. Legislation isn't going to really solve that sort of problem. And what I've found over my many years of being on this earth, if you apply societal pressure, right, you don't see people smoking in movies or films, or you apply that sort of pressure to guns and gun violence, and you bring that bright light into it, has a much better effect than any law they could pass.
I agree with you 100%.
That's a first.
You make it socially
unacceptable. Yeah,
right. The way you do with drinking and driving, the way you do with smoking.
You're talking about shaming.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, look, and part of that, I'm not a big fan of PSA campaigns, but part of that is a byproduct of public service announcements, of changing a culture, which takes time. But right now, and it's been a long time since I've been 13, 14 years old, but you're 13 and you're smoking, you're pretty cool. Right now, again, I don't know. It's not the inner circle that I roll with, if you will.
If you're 52 and smoking, you're not cool these days.
Well,
so.
I've got a 14-year-old son. I don't get the sense that he and his friends, they don't smoke, and I don't get the sense that they think it's cool.
Up next on Round and Round, pharmacy giant CVS has told workers in the San Francisco area, and around the nation for that matter, to go reveal their weight and other health information or pay extra for health coverage. Now, the employees aren't revealing it directly to CVS. They need to reveal it to the insurance company. Speaking of trying to push social behavior here, obviously, the more unhealthy someone is, the more we all pay in insurance premiums, I guess. Is that the thought on this?
I guess. I mean, I'm a smoker, so I'm paying more for my health insurance. I don't see if you're overweight, you're going to have more medical problems. So I'm not sure what the plus, if you're working for CVS, you get a discount on your drugs, I would think.
Oh, that's very funny. But first of all, that's not mandated by your employer, and this isn't chump change. It's $50 a month, which totals $600 a year. So they want employees, they must report their weight, body fat, cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar levels, and also they must be tobacco-free.
Oh, well, now I'll never get a job at CVS then, I guess. But,
yeah, I'm out.
But I think that this is a little coercive, and I think...
Is this a CVS policy, or is this their health carrier's policy?
This is a CVS policy.
Well, that's kind of ridiculous then. Especially body fat. The whole body fat BMI index is just ridiculous.
I remember they did a BMI index on Brian Roberts years ago.
Yeah.
And he was obese, according to the BMI index.
Well, I mean, come on, look at the guy. You can tell
he hasn't worked forever.
Yeah, you can tell that this is a guy that definitely has trouble hoofing it down the first base line, right?
But is this getting dangerous? And again, Steve, this isn't coming from the insurance company. This is coming from CVS. If they're telling you what legal activities you can or can't participate in without paying a fine,
right?
Hate to use the term slippery slope, but is it? Can they dictate other? Well, why
it's
is
the rhetoric of the matter?
It is the rhetoric of the matter. Why is it limited to simply how much you weigh or whether you're smoking or not? Why can't
if you have 2 glasses of wine or 3 glasses of wine?
All right, okay, so I hate to throw the monkey wrench into this, Jimmy, but don't people also have the right to say, you know what? I'm just not going to work for CVS. I'll go work for Walgreens or Rite Aid or whatever. And I mean, so I mean that's the other shoe here is that if you don't like the policy of a particular employer, go work for somebody else.
Well, why can't the employer be discriminatory in nature? And if you don't like working for a racist employer, you go somewhere else.
No, I'm just saying.
I'm all about free markets. I get that, but I think that on the 3-year anniversary of Obamacare, I think this is the onion getting peeled back another layer.
I see where you're going, and I'm not saying I disagree. I mean, I look at that and I think, gosh, I have so many concerns if my employer started asking. Because the thing is even if I'm telling the insurance company, I think reasonable human beings understand that the HR department for the company they work for is seeing this on some level. They're getting this information because they become aware of what each employee is being billed for, for their insurance. So
that's the back door.
So I definitely get that. But I also just want to point out that the flip side of that coin is that if you don't like it, you can. I mean, because you won't be able to affect the policy at the corporate level,
right?
But you can vote with your feet and walk out.
What I find funny about this, the justification from a top CVS executive, quote, these changes aren't just about cost, they're about each of us taking personal accountability for our own health, end quote.
Well, as long as it's forced on you by the upper layers of the corporation.
You got it. Next up on Round and Round, it looks like all passengers in motor vehicles are going to be required to wear a seatbelt under a bill getting preliminary approval by Maryland State Senate on Wednesday. This is still going through the legislative process. Also, it would increase the fine. It would double it, currently at $25 to $50, meaning if you're in the back seat, not click it. Well, if you're, click it or ticket? What's that?
Yeah,
what's that catchy little cliche? Again, when I talk about the slippery slope, this is what I'm bringing up. Cell phone use, secondary offense. Now it's a primary. Same thing with texting. Camel's nose under the tent on seatbelts, $25. All in the name of your safety. Now, if you're in the back seat and now they've doubled the price on it.
Look, how do you? Everybody in the vehicle's got to be seatbelted. I mean, look, first of all, I wear my seatbelt because, frankly, if I don't, not only will I get a ticket, but that stupid little alarm keeps going off. I mean, I got in the car the other day and drove it down to the corner. Just hadn't put it on yet, and you get 10 feet out of your parking spot and it starts dinging at you.
Well, that's one of the benefits of rolling Cadillac style like I do, Brian. I don't have any of these annoyances.
You can just have
the Plymouth Voyager.
Run that thing into a brick wall, no airbags come out, and then they don't have seatbelts. I got a bungee cord. I pull over my soapbox and sitting on the floor. It's great.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's, I mean,
but the way you power it with your feet too to get going down 695.
But the question I have is how can you how is that enforced, and how will the police be able to tell? Because I don't think in a lot of vehicles it's always so easy.
Right.
Or is it just another excuse for them to pull you over to look for something else?
Here's the thing. Well, which is also a good point. Yeah. Which pretty much they can pull you over for any reason they want right now. I don't know that they need more legislation for that. Nationally speaking, it's been Democrats that have pushed these seatbelt laws, and they do it under safety. It's not about money; it's about safety, and also it drives up the cost of insurance and everybody. Blah blah blah. To that, I would throw it back and say, "Isn't it my right to choose
to kill yourself in a car?
Whether no, I'm not going to run into anything.
I've
gotten into many accidents. I'm still alive. Isn't it my right to choose?"
That's comforting.
I'm glad I'm leaving the station before you. Then that's all I'm saying.
I hope my friendly neighbor isn't listening. No, but the liberal mantra is always, it's your body, you got the right to choose what you want to do with it, unless, of course, it's whether you want to wear a seatbelt or not.
If you're going there today, but
I won't go to abortion, but I'll ask you this, Steve.
Sure.
I mean, okay, when you're in a car, you affect other people, but if I'm not wearing my seatbelt and I'm driving in a car and I get into a car accident and I get ejected through the front window,
and you hit somebody.
Well, I mean,
your body.
That's a 1,000,000-to-1 shot. I mean, at that point, I should probably be buying a lotto ticket.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I've been a reporter for a long, long time, and I don't think I've ever written a story about someone being killed by a human projectile. So, so if
it's still on the bucket list. So if you're saying.
Well, look, if I go carpooling with Mathis, it probably could happen. But I'm just saying, if I get ejected out of the car window and I'm the one that dies, God, I don't want to say that's my choice, but but I'm not really affecting anybody else but me and maybe my family, who arguably may or may not be happy to see me gone.
But Steve's whole point about you're affecting other people, that's the argument on the CVS thing, that by you not being healthy, you're driving up the insurance premium on me.
Right. And if you get ejected and you don't have health insurance and you don't die, I'm paying to take you to the hospital and your health care and then mine.
So you're rooting for me to die then?
Quickly.
Just so you don't have to pay
this is our
for
first show together, Brian. I would never do that on the first show.
Before the medevac gets there, because that's going to cost me a ton of money.
Exactly.
How much is that flight again?
But if you get to the point where that's the methodology that you're going to use, you're stripping away civil liberties at that point. Because anything can be tied into indirect cost attained by someone else. Coming back to what I eat. If I'm going to be unhealthy, whether it's through food, booze, tobacco, what have you, gambling.
You know what? I just came up with an idea.
Yeah.
That's the next thing that they can mandate on the, when you go into McDonald's now, you see the menu and they tell you how many calories it is.
Yeah.
They should actually tell you what the charge will be under the Federal Health Care for All Act.
But think about it, guys. I mean,
how much your
joking.
insurance is going up?
Yeah, that's right. If
If
you have the Big Mac, if you supersize it, here's the because they actually break that out and tell you, like, depending on what size meal you get, here's the calories.
That should help the favorability of Obamacare.
I think there. I mean, if you just knew what the dollar amount attached to it was, you could make healthier decisions.
But if I go to Atlantic City for a week, let's say, and gamble away my kids' college fund, and I can't pay the mortgage, and I can't put food on the table, that's my decision to do that. Now I have no money. Now I got to come.
No, you know what? Wait a minute, because then you're going to apply for financial aid to send your kid to college, and I might be paying for it.
That's my point. That's my point.
I thought that might be where you were headed.
If this is the logic that we're going to use in it, the spokes that come out of this wheel are many. From food to lifestyle decisions to social behavior. It's not just limited to seatbelts.
Yeah, but we're talking about seatbelts right now.
Yeah. Talking about seatbelts today and tomorrow. Can't go to Atlantic City.
Tomorrow it's a meteor tax.
Brian Sears, Steve Stoden in studio. Round and round. Continuing next.